Hi, it's Earth Computer, and today I want to talk a little bit about this weird bug that I discovered about end generation. But in the main end island there's none of this that really occurs, so let's start by going out to the outer end islands. So probably the most common manifestation of this bug is the dependency on which direction you approach these chorus plants from on where the chorus plants actually generate. So I'm currently approaching these from the north direction, which means that you would get a few generating here. There's one here, one here, one here. But if I were to delete this world and regenerate a world with the same seed and approach the chorus flowers from the other direction instead, then what you might find is that the chorus plants are shifted over by a chunk. So yeah, that's the most common manifestation of this bug. But more importantly for this video is that this bug actually also applies to these random end gateway portals that can spawn. So these are not the ones that can spawn on the main end island or the ones that are linked to them. These are the random ones that you see further out, which when you go through them go back to the world spawn point. Before we go any further, let's do a quick recap on how chunk generation works. Imagine that over there are 4 ungenerated chunks in the end, and I'm a player about to walk towards them. When I walk forwards 1 chunk, the player has moved forward 1 chunk and a row of chunks has generated. However, the game still cannot create any chorus plants, because if the game was to try and create a chorus plant here, then there's ungenerated terrain here. The game can't create a chorus plant here. It could create a chorus plant here on this chunk border, because there's generated terrain on both sides, and it could potentially create one here as well, because there's some generated chunks here which I haven't marked out. But the point is that the game can't make the chorus flowers appear or populate the chunks at the same time as it generates them. Once all 4 chunks are generated, however, things are a little different, and there's an area in the middle that chorus plants can safely generate. There's a little buffer out to ungenerated chunks that they can generate into. So chorus plants can generate within this middle region, and this is called chunk population. So the bug is this. Normally, by normally I mean in the overworld and in the nether, chunk population, the randomness of that is dependent on A, the world seed, and B, obviously the coordinates of the chunk that's being populated. Well, in the end that's not quite the case. In the end, the randomness of population is dependent on A, the world seed, and B, the coordinates of the last chunk that was generated. And I'm going to show you now how that's different. Let's go back to the scenario where the player is walking towards a chunk. Once the player has walked over 2 chunks, I've marked out the latest chunk that was generated, and then once all of these 4 chunks are loaded at once, the population will happen here in the middle based on the coordinates of this latest chunk that was generated. Now let's assume a different scenario where the player approached this chunk from the other direction. Now I've marked out the last chunk that was generated once all 4 have been generated, or the chunk that's been last generated once all 4 have been generated. As you can see, this is in a different location, which will cause the population in this chunk to be different. This is what causes the shifting that's observed with the chorus plants in the end. Now this is all very cool with the chorus plants, but how is this useful in any way? Well, I've been saying chorus plants throughout the video, but this all applies to the random gateway portals as well. So you can move around the gateway portals like this. But what's even more interesting is that we can approach these 2 chunks and generate them from one side, and then we can choose not to load all 4 simultaneously, and then we can move away again. Then we can move around the edge, being careful not to generate any of these chunks, and then Once we reach the other side, we can then approach the other two chunks and generate them, and then move away again. So now we have all of those 4 chunks generated, but the population still hasn't happened yet. Now once this is done, let's go out and generate a favorable chunk, and now this chunk over here, now we've generated it, is the last chunk to be generated. Now we can go back and populate this chunk in the middle here, and based on the world seed and the last chunk which was generated, which is way over there, we can then do the population. So it's going to first create the chorus plants, and then it's going to decide whether to place the end gateway portal. So all we have to do to generate a random gateway portal in any location we choose is to control which was the last chunk that was generated. However, in practice it's rather tricky to do this, and let me explain why. When we initially went forward to generate the first 2 rows of chunks, we were also generating these 2 chunks even closer to us, which caused the chunks here to be, or population here in the middle to happen, so that the chorus plants, there could be chorus plants growing into this area here, which into this buffer, which would affect the population of this chunk later on. And if it affects it, then it could happen that the random gateway portal might not spawn anymore because of a different scenario that we weren't expecting. This is actually a bug which affects the overworld and nether population as well, but yeah. However, this isn't that hard to get around, because all you have to do is send in flying machines which will generate these chunks but not populate them or any chunks around them, and then all you have to do is send in another flying machine which will populate the chunks without populating chunks around them. It's a little bit tricky to execute, but it is possible. So mostly just a theoretical video from me today, but we are actually planning on using this for at least one project that I know of on ProtoTech, but its usefulness is now a little bit limited because of the fact that or some of the stuff Smokey's been doing, but there is maybe a little use aside from like this rather secret project that we have going on in ProtoTech, is the fact that you can actually make 4 of these portals right next to each other. So you could have one like this, and then maybe one like, or tessellate them like this. Yep, and then you could have one over here. See where I'm going with this? And we actually have a 3x3 of bedrock here, and that can be used for wither cages, which is pretty useful. So that's it, thanks for watching.